Welcome everyone to this 1 hour on the Virtual Volunteer Resource Service overview. Um, I'm Viv Cunningham-Smith. I'm CEO of EV Strengthening Communities, and I'm joined by Shona Bass, who is the manager of our virtual VRC program. And Shona and I are just going to take you through how it works, how it might be useful to you, and please unmute and ask any questions. There will be time for questions at the end also. So let's get started. I'm sure everyone is familiar with what the old physical volunteer resource centres used to do. You may be aware that EV ran a volunteer resource service out of Ringwood for the Eastern region for about 40 years, prior to the Commonwealth defunding VRCs across the nation in 2020. The only VRCs that currently exist in Victoria are funded through council, so are very, very place-based. VRCs or VRSs, Volunteer Resource Services, those two are interchangeable, are place-based services that support all aspects of volunteering in the community. So they used to assist people to find the right opportunities for them in volunteering. So people used to come to volunteer resource centres, be assessed in terms of all of the factors that we know influence people's successful volunteering, matched to a range of volunteer opportunities in that community, and then referred on. So that was a really important aspect. And I participated in a Commonwealth evaluation this year of another program, the VMA5, and this was the bit that everyone nationally was saying was missing. But VRCs also supported organisations with their volunteer workforces, and they did this particularly for small to medium community organisations who didn't have a lot of money to access training, to access Justice Connect, AICD for their boards, or other more formal programs. So they tended to provide localised training in recruitment, management, retention of volunteers, inclusion, which is a big one, and governance. But they also coordinated network and regional planning for volunteering in their territories. So when all of this disappeared in 2020, we decided to build it virtually. And so we started, and Shona, I'm using the royal we, Shona started to build the volunteer navigation hub to focus on the individuals who were looking to volunteer, and I'll go through each of these components. We developed the EV Learning and Support Hub, which was about the training aspect of what the old VRCs did, and the online community of practice, which was the networking role of the previous VRCs. So let's have a look at the navigation hub. This is a hub that is accessed by a simple QR code that people can use. And we've run it in Manningham and Maroondah for 12 months. We've had 570 people access the hub. 297 of those have been actively assessed and referred. 36 reported they were successful in getting a volunteer role. And this raises the issue that organisations are not taking down their roles. Organisations are often rejecting volunteers. And so the nexus between that referral and successful volunteer relies on not only the volunteer individual, but also what's happening in the organisations. And VRCs traditionally impacted both sides of that coin. 273 did not proceed, or were not contactable. So the reality is, through this, you also get a lot of unemployed people who are ticking off Centrelink, but you also get a significant number of people who are genuinely looking to volunteer. And what we know also is the accessibility of the QR code, so how widely it is distributed, really influences who comes through the hub. So when there's widespread advertisement of the QR code, we see major shifts in the number of people coming through the hub. And 135 volunteers actually required support. So that gives you an idea, with some limited promotion in both Manningham and Maroondah. That's what we saw in the last 12 months. In terms of who we saw, you'll see a large proportion of unemployed people, 40 young people, people experiencing disability, very high number of people who had English as a second language or were newly arrived migrants, less focus on people of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, from the Torres Strait Islander communities. So what is the NAV Hub? As I said, you access it via a QR code, and it needs to be promoted widely by local organisations. The people using the QR code get a registration form. Now, that registration process is simplified for those with literacy and language issues. So when you go into the QR code, up comes a registration process. If you can't fill a registration form in, for whatever reason, you just provide name, contact details, and we contact you back, or the assessors contact you back. But it can be completed in full. The registration form is the basis for assessment. That's then triaged by a coordinator and allocated for assessment. We have an assessment team of real human beings who are trained by us. This is for our backyard. And I'll explain a little bit about how it can work for you without using us as EV. But at the moment, I'm going to talk about EV. So our assessors meet with the individual based upon the registration process, and they meet online. So we have assessors peppered across Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria. So they go through the registration process, which really brings out why people want to volunteer, what time they've got available, their motivations, their transport needs. It's a comprehensive assessment. Opportunities are then identified through Seek Volunteer. We use Seek as the basis for identifying opportunities in that person's local community. And those assessors can assist people to connect to those organisations. As you can imagine, not everyone is happy making cold calls. So our assessors can make the referrals to those organisations if the person wants. They can also assist that referral in a little bit more detail. So if someone's not too sure that an organisation might be culturally safe or accessible and inclusive, our assessors can actually work with the organisation on that. So it's not just a straight tick and flick referral. In terms of how a NAV hub might be implemented in your local region, you can, in fact, participate and get the NAV hub and organise it locally with your own assessor teams if you so wish. You can use our assessor teams, but we will always refer back to local place-based services and opportunities. We're about connecting people into their communities. So the NAV hub, if you wanted to look at that, you would receive the QR code, you would do the promotion. We can do the promotion, but that costs you more. If you do the localised promotion, if you want your own local assessor teams, you can brand the NAV hub as your hub and implement it from there. It is a single point of contact for people. We know it works when that QR code is accessible in community. I'm just going to stop there and see if there are any questions. Just unmute yourself if there is a question around that. And hopefully you can unmute yourself. No? Okay. Let's move on. The second component of the NAV hub is, of the virtual VRC is the EV Learning Hub. This is an online hub with self-guided modules designed by Shona and her team of instructional designers. It is different too, and it supplements existing online training programs such as the VA portal, which tends to focus on volunteer managers and building capacity and competency there. We are not trying to duplicate that. The EV Learning Hub is more stylised to local and regional needs. And there are three arms to it. There is support for organisations, which replaces the VRC role in training that we all used to do. Support for leaders and boards, so that's management support and governance support, and support for individuals looking to volunteer. We've developed a range of modules over time and will continue to do so. But the thing with this is localized modules can in fact be developed, and you can use this platform locally as your training base for your volunteer organisations. Let's just unpack that a bit. So support for organisations very much at the moment focuses on inclusion, and there's some really exciting modules in that are self-guided around organisations looking at their inclusion for volunteers and also how to work towards being more inclusive. There's the diversity and inclusion module as well that looks at describing how you become an inclusive organisation. The other three modules, and there are now, the other three modules are very much about self-preparation for organisations. There is also a small grant writing module that takes people through how to write effective small grants, and this one is particularly tailored at local government grants. We're adding to these in the future, so looking at tender writing, but also can stylise these modules to local need. So that is the suite currently. The support for leaders, we have What is My Governance Role, which is actually an induction module for people joining community organisation boards that explain their governance role. It's based on our fairly successful introduction to being a board member. It is immensely accessible and it takes people through the core roles of being a board member on a community organisation. We have being an effective chair. We are adding being an effective secretary, understanding your finances, and a board induction module that explains to community organisations how to properly induct their board members. It also explains in the What is My Governance role that it doesn't matter whether you call yourself a board or a community of management. If you're an incorporated association, you are a board member, because that is often a very common fallacy in the community sector. So these modules are readily available. I forgot to mention that the previous modules, the inclusion ones, are in fact available to 50 organisations through Volunteering Victoria. So if you have organisations who do want to work on inclusion, please make them aware that they can access those modules free for a year through Volunteering Victoria, who have contracted us to deliver those modules across the state. Then we've got support for individuals, and we've currently focused on young people. So we have a range of modules there: volunteering as a young person, preparing to volunteer, and using volunteering as an employment or study pathway. We're working currently on introductions for people who want to volunteer. So not just focused on young people, but how to be successful as a volunteer. These are very much focused for people looking to volunteer so that they can maximise their experience, but also understand that it is that two-way street around what is a successful volunteering opportunity. And the third component of the virtual VRC is the communities of practice, and that is the networking opportunities that VRCs used to provide. So bringing together organisations in a region in an in-person network to talk about all things volunteering, to conduct training, to develop capacity, and also to talk about common issues. This doesn't replace that. What it does is keep organisations connected in between those in-person meetings, and enables lots of organisations to have common discussions outside of those in-person meetings and to resource share. It's an online community of practice platform that can be regionalised or localised for you to moderate. And as I said, it is that glue that keeps organisations regionally talking to each other in between those in-person meetings. It does need to be moderated. It does need to be active, and Shona will talk a little bit more about the platform and what its potential is. This is what it looks like when you get onto the homepage. People need to join the community of practice, but then the groups function that you can see up here is where you can localize your community of practice. And you'll see when you go into the community of practice as an individual, this is my screen, that I've got lots of options because I'm an admin person, but I can access my groups as an individual. So groups can be assigned to you as an individual. You can be a member of several groups. You can advertise your events. You can start your discussions. It is an incredibly flexible communication tool. And we've actually used it in the Manningham Volunteer Resource Service It came late into the contract because it took quite a long time to build. But we're currently using it across Victoria, and we being EV, for our community transport networking through the Victorian Special Interest Group, and also for our VMA5 program in the Eastern region that focuses on inclusive volunteering. The reason I put this up is you can see that these are private groups. People need to come in and join your group privately. It is not, these groups are not visible to other people outside of that group and platform. So in terms of implementation of this, you can actually set up your own community of practice for volunteering. You can moderate it. You can put anything you want on it. You control it at the local level. And that's the beauty of this platform. Shona, do you want to come in at this point and talk a little bit more eloquently about what else that platform can do for people?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Viv. I can't screen share at the moment, so I'll just speak to the group. So we explored numerous platforms to deliver the community of practice in a way we wanted it to be. And the first one or two that we trialed didn't have the functionality that we're after. And then we found this platform, which is used by hundreds of organisations across the globe, that has been specifically designed for a collaboration within community groups, or it could be within an LGA, or it could be across the state, or it could be across the country. It doesn't matter. And it is very, very powerful because it gives people who join a particular community the opportunity to interact, share resources, share events. They can go to look up who else is in the group. You can identify, you can have particular discussion feeds. There's a media centre that you can start developing educational resources on within your own group that is pertinent to your group, putting in YouTube links and other visuals that go into the media centre. There is also what we call a global group, so that everyone that is part of a private group is also part of the global group. And that's something that Viv and I conduct, and we can alert you to particular reports that are coming out, any events that are going on, any webinars that we're running. The other thing that's very powerful with the platform is that it's got functionality to run events in terms of advertising, registering, everything that you may do through Humanitix or other event management systems that is embedded in this platform, and it's very powerful for anyone who's joined the platform to run events from within the platform. So the people who use this platform range from anything from college alumni to the College of Paediatricians to groups like ours, or right down to local or particular sporting communities or business communities. So it is across all sectors. So it's not necessarily isolated to the volunteer sector. It can really, it is applicable to any group of organisations who want to come together and have a seamless way of communicating, sharing resources, advertising events, and really promoting opportunities within their group. So, Viv, how does that sound?
That sounds great. Thanks, Shona. So the components, and I'm just going back to see, yes. So the components of the VRC, so the three components, the NAV Hub placing individuals into volunteering, the EV Learning Hub, which replaces the training aspect, and it, again, doesn't replace all of the training aspects that a VRC did, but it certainly supplements local in-person training. And we know post-COVID that a lot of people simply in our sector don't have the time to go to a half day or particularly a full day training. You know, we're all too busy just meeting our basic contract deliverables these days. So the EV Learning Hub is self-guided. So people can do the training in their own time if required, and they're bite-sized training. So it allows flexibility to provide both in-person but also online training. And then obviously the communities of practice is an incredibly powerful infrastructure for connecting organisations utilising volunteer workforces. So the whole virtual VRC was built as the infrastructure to go into communities, whether that be on an LGA basis or a smaller set of communities or a region such as the Eastern. It was built as the infrastructure for volunteering support. It doesn't mean that EV runs it. So that infrastructure can be used by local government. It can be used by lead organisations as their infrastructure to provide volunteering support, either in a region, a geographical region, or perhaps in a community of interest or a specific organisation or consumer group. It can occur also at the philanthropic level. So Bendigo Bank, for instance, might like to fund it for its particular consumer geographic region. The infrastructure itself is flexible enough to lend itself to implementation. It can also be managed through existing VRCs. So where there is council funding for a VRC in Victoria, it can be managed through, and it's ideally managed through that VRC because it provides that infrastructure. And as I said, it can be provided and managed through other leadership organisations. The minimum expenditure for the three components, the full virtual VRC, is $10,000 per annum. And that is where it is entirely localised. So EV doesn't moderate, EV doesn't promote. You actually use the infrastructure as you want it. You promote it, you manage it, you moderate the communities of practice, and you promote the training. I will say if there are additional modules that are required, that's additional to the 10,000. But if you're just using the existing infrastructure, the minimum spend is 10,000 per annum. There are levels of increasing expenditure, and that really depends upon a region's want for our involvement. So if a region doesn't want to moderate a community of practice and it wants us to do that, there are different levels of funding for that. You can also purchase the Learning Hub and communities of practice separately. So you don't necessarily, if you don't want the NAV Hub, although I would say that on all the evidence that I've seen in the last 2 years, people want to volunteer. All the research is telling us they don't know how to navigate into volunteering. If you give them a pathway to navigate in a place-based regional way, people come. But you need the capacity to influence both sides of the coin, the individuals looking to volunteer, but also the organisations and how they're offering volunteering opportunities. And we talk a lot about that both sides need to be influenced. But if your focus is on organisations, then you can purchase the Learning Hub and Communities of Practice. Or you can do what Volunteering Victoria has done and purchase specific modules for your area. So the virtual VRC has been built to really keep that place-based focus on volunteering. It is the infrastructure for that place-based volunteering. Why? Because we believe strongly that if you're going to have a strong volunteering workforce, you can't do that centrally at a state and you can't do that at a national level. It has to be within people's communities. So we built the infrastructure to go into those communities. That's it. I hope it has explained what the virtual VRC is for you, and happy to take questions. And I'm going to allow you all to talk.
Viv, can you stop screen sharing as well?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes. So Catherine, Jamie, you've got a hand up.
It's Jamie here. Catherine is in the room. She just hasn't got the functionality to be able to use audio at the moment.
Okay, we'll just wait.
Maybe if there's a question, you can put it through the Q&A.
Can you provide these slides and further information on costings? Thanks, Lee. Yes, we most certainly can. If you would like, Shona, could you put your email into the Q&A, please? So anyone who does want more information on the costings, there are 3 tiers at the moment, but tiers can be flexible. So the basic one, as I said, is $10,000. There's a $20,000 tier, and there's a full implementation where we run the VRC, which is $90,000. But that's not our aim. Our aim is to have this infrastructure in communities, run by communities, as opposed to run by us. So
I was going to say the other options as well is taking tier 1 or tier 2 and then taking modules. So it's an add-on. So
yes.
it's like $5,000 add-on for additional modules or $5,000 add-on for community of practice moderation. So it is really working with the organisation to customise the infrastructure to their needs. So it's not just 10, 20 or 90. They're the starting points.
Yeah, thanks, Shona. Yeah, absolutely. And why EV is doing this, as I said, is because we believed in place-based volunteer support. And in Victoria, that was cruelly taken away in 2020. And we've seen that the post-COVID loss of volunteering also actually coincided with the loss of place-based VRCs. And we think both has influenced the volunteering workforce and the trends in volunteering workforce in Victoria. So If there aren't any more questions, what I might do is say thank you to everyone for coming along. If you are interested, Shona is always happy to talk with you about the flexibility of the infrastructure and how you might look at implementing it in your regions. So thank you.